Have you ever felt completely torn between wanting to chase after massive, world-altering success, leaving a permanent mark on history, and just craving a quiet, simple life where absolutely nobody bothers you?
Oh, that is the ultimate human dilemma,
Yeah.
right?
Or how about this scenario? Have you ever finally achieved a huge milestone, gotten the exact professional or personal recognition you thought you wanted, and instantly felt like a total imposter?
Like the real you is just hiding behind some carefully constructed mask.
Exactly. If any of that resonates with you, this deep dive is going to be incredibly relevant.
It really is. We are examining a truly remarkable and rather unconventional document today. It's titled Liber Umbræ Lucis, which translates from Latin to the Book of Shadow and Light.
And the backstory of this text is fascinating in its own right.
Oh, absolutely. It was discovered among a collection of private papers in Padua, Italy, back in 2023. On its surface, the text presents itself as the final, deeply private meditations of Francesco Petrarch.
For anyone who might need a quick refresher, Petrarch was the legendary 14th century Italian Renaissance poet.
He basically kick-started humanism, that massive cultural shift away from strict medieval theology toward a focus on human potential, reason, and our actual lived experience on Earth.
Yeah.
So the manuscript is dated 1373, allegedly written when he was an old man living in the quiet, secluded hills of Arquà, sensing that his life was rapidly coming to an end.
But the twist at the end of this document completely reframed how I read it.
The editorial notes are quite a shock.
They really are. If you go all the way to the editorial notes, tucked at the very back of the publication, you discover this isn't actually a lost 14th century manuscript at all. It is an imaginative reconstruction written in 2023.
Like completely modern creation.
Yeah, a modern author essentially steeped themselves in Petrarch's authenticated works, his letters, his poetic rhythms, and embodied the pattern of his voice to create a fiction that feels incredibly true to his spirit. It is essentially a modern mind carrying on an intimate conversation with a 14th century ghost.
And that specific context changes how we interact with the material. Our mission today isn't to debate the literal medieval authorship of these pages or get bogged down in historical authentication.
Right, we can leave that to the academics.
Exactly. Regardless of who actually held the pen in 2023, this text is packed with profound, universal nuggets of philosophy. It uses the historical framework of Petrarch's extraordinary life to explore existential dilemmas we all still struggle with.
Things like the alienating nature of fame, or how we experience the passage of time.
The physical reality of grief and how we navigate the transitional phases or the thresholds of our lives. It is essentially a mirror held up to the complexities of modern life, just dressed in 14th century robes.
Okay, let's unpack this. Starting with this brilliant concept of the threshold, because it perfectly captures that feeling of being torn that we just talked about.
The first meditation is so vivid here.
It really is. The text paints a picture of Petrarch living in Vaucluse, right in his prime, and he takes an early morning walk along the River Sorgue. It is that gray, misty, ambiguous light just before dawn, and he comes across a spot where a massive, ancient stone sits right in the middle of the river, dividing the rushing water into two completely distinct streams.
In that misty morning light, he sees those two streams as the physical embodiment of the choice that has tormented him his entire adult life.
One stream flows violently down toward the valley.
Right, toward the bustling cities of Avignon, Rome, and Florence. That stream represents the active life. It is history, ambition, societal engagement, and the relentless pursuit of legacy.
While the other stream flows back toward the mountain, toward the quiet hidden cave where the river actually originates.
And that second stream represents contemplation, silence, spiritual retreat, and the inner life.
Let me play devil's advocate for a second, though. He looks at this rock and realizes he isn't meant to choose a stream. He realizes he is the stone dividing the waters. He is meant to exist right there in the middle, belonging fully to neither side, but isn't deciding to be the stone in the middle of the river, just a convenient excuse for not making a hard choice.
Well, how does the text differentiate between living in the threshold and just being paralyzed by indecision? That is the exact tension the text addresses. The philosophers he studied so obsessively, Aristotle, the Stoics, Augustine, they all demanded that he choose a definitive path.
Pick the active life or the contemplative life.
You reside in the city of man or the city of God. But the manuscript argues that standing in the threshold isn't a failure of commitment or a sign of paralysis. It is a highly specific, active vocation. It requires immense strength to withstand the current of both streams without being swept away by either.
You have to brace yourself against it.
Precisely. The threshold is the active membrane where shadow and light meet. And this rejection of a binary existence ties directly into how the text discusses our experience of time, specifically distinguishing between two ancient Greek concepts, chronos and kairos.
This analysis of time felt incredibly urgent to me because we're all completely drowning in chronos right now. Our entire modern culture is built on it.
Chronos is ordinary sequential clock time. It is the literal ticking of the seconds, the relentless filling of the calendar, the unyielding flow of the past, pushing into the future. It is quantitative.
And he complains about this, right?
Ooh, bitterly. He writes in the text that in his youth, Chronos felt infinitely slow, like an endless expanse of days, but in his old age, it accelerates dizzyingly, slipping through his fingers. We try to manage Chronos, we try to optimize it, but it always wins.
It always wins.
Then the text introduces Kairos. Kairos is qualitative time. It is significant time. It is the pregnant instant, the deep time where the ordinary sequence seems to pause entirely and eternity briefly breaks in.
The way the author describes Kairos is just beautiful. It is those rare moments where the usual exhausting chatter of your mind just stops. You are watching the evening light hit the hills, or you are holding a newborn, or you are reading a paragraph that speaks directly to your soul across centuries.
You aren't just existing on a random Tuesday afternoon.
Exactly. You feel the weight of all time folded into the present instant. You aren't measuring the moment, you are entirely inside it.
The text suggests that the deepest, most meaningful pulse of human existence do not happen by endlessly optimizing Chronos. You cannot calendar invite your way into a profound realization.
As much as we try to.
As much as we try, those moments happen by remaining open to Kairos, by deliberately standing in the threshold and being receptive when the sequence of time fractures.
Think about how much pressure we face to constantly choose a lane and optimize our lives. We are bombarded by algorithms and productivity gurus telling us to squeeze maximum value out of every single minute of our chronos. You have to be the ultimate hustling professional, or you have to be the ultimate unplugged Zen minimalist.
There is rarely a middle ground offered.
Right. But this text gives you permission to say, no, I am the stone. You can embrace the messy, contradictory threshold. You don't actually have to resolve all the contradictions of your life to live it fully and meaningfully.
That ongoing tension between opposing forces brings us to another central theme in the manuscript: the intimate relationship between light and shadow. This is particularly insightful when the text turns to the topics of success and melancholy. The author uses a wonderful grounding analogy of a sundial located in Petrarch's garden in Arquà.
He writes that without the shadow, the upright finger of the sundial, the no one, tells us absolutely nothing. It is just a piece of metal pointing at the sky. It is the darkness that actually measures and gives meaning to the light.
And Petrarch carried a vast amount of darkness.
A deep, pervasive melancholy that he beautifully describes as the shadow cast by an uncommon light.
He connects this philosophical idea directly to Dante, pointing out that the Divine Comedy notoriously begins in a dark wood. The ultimate vision of paradise doesn't retroactively exempt the poet from having suffered in the dark wood. The suffering, the wandering, and the political exile are the very things that fuel the true utterance.
You don't get the light of the poetry without the shadow of the pain.
Exactly. But the most striking application of this shadow and light dynamic is how the text analyzes his own staggering level of celebrity.
Here's where it gets really interesting.
Yeah.
Because Petrarch was arguably one of the very first true celebrities of the modern era. And the text zeroes in on this specific monumental day, Easter Sunday, 1341.
A massive turning point for him.
He is standing on the Capitoline Hill in Rome, and he is receiving the laurel crown. He is being officially recognized by the state as the greatest living poet, the first person to receive this specific honor in over 1,000 years. He lobbied for it. He prepared obsessively for it. He literally staged the entire spectacle. Imagine the sensory overload of that moment.
When that woven crown finally touches his head, he feels this intense, rushing wind of joy. It is the pinnacle of his chronos, total, undeniable fulfillment of his lifelong ambition.
But the text reveals that this feeling lasts for maybe a few days, and then comes the devastating drop, the agonizing realization that the crown is literally just a wreath of leaves that will eventually dry out, turn brittle, and wither.
The high wears off completely.
The internal emptiness returns almost immediately because underneath the laurel wreath, he is the exact same flawed, anxious, melancholy guy he was before the ceremony. The external validation changed absolutely nothing about his internal reality.
What's fascinating here is the manuscript's profound, almost clinical analysis of the mechanics of fame. The text realizes that fame is not a substance that exists within the celebrated person. It exists entirely and exclusively in the minds of the public.
It's all projected.
Yes, and what the public actually loves is a curated artifact. It is a mask.
It is the 14th century equivalent of an influencer's perfectly curated Instagram feed or a CEO's flawless LinkedIn profile. The famous Petrarch is a character he invented. It is constructed out of his most polished verses and his carefully edited public letters.
It is completely stripped of his real-life silences, his crippling insecurities, his moral failings. So when crowds are pointing at him in the streets of Milan or Venice, whispering his name, they are praising a fiction.
Which has to feel incredibly lonely.
Utterly lonely. The author writes that the immortality of fame is an immortality for others, not for the self. The actual consciousness that feels the cold, that fears death, that desperately loves, that consciousness will cease to exist. Leaving behind brilliant books and a famous name is just a slightly slower form of decay.
And the public adores the mask.
Which paradoxically means the actual man underneath the mask is left feeling entirely alone. His true self remains utterly unseen by the masses cheering for him.
That total alienation he felt from his public mask actually perfectly explains his relationship with Laura. If the public was a fake connection he could control, Laura was a terrifyingly real connection he couldn't control at all. She was the absolute antithesis of his public celebrity.
Laura is undeniably the gravitational center of Petrarch's emotional life, and the manuscript treats her memory with incredible reverence. The text recounts how he first saw her in a church in Avignon on April 6, 1327.
And then in a devastating tragedy of poetic symmetry, she died of the Black Death exactly 21 years later.
On the very same day, April 6, 1348.
The day she appeared to him and the day she disappeared from the world, perfectly aligned. He remarks in the text that it was like the universe composing a poem far too perfect and too cruel to actually endure. His love for her was famously unrequited. He circled her from a distance for decades, writing hundreds of poems about her.
But the manuscript reveals something deeply vulnerable. He valued her not knowing over the public's knowing. With her, he couldn't wear the polished mask of the laureate. His sheer longing stripped away all his defenses.
The most profound emotional shift in the text, however, happens in the decades after her death.
The manuscript explores the idea that deep memory is not merely an act of mental recollection. It is a literal, ongoing presence. He confesses something in the third meditation that sounds almost like madness to a purely rational mind. He claims he knows her better now, 25 years after her physical death, than he ever did when she was alive.
The way the text explains this mechanism of memory is through one of the most striking analogies I have encountered in a long time: the wax and the seal. Picture a heavy, intricately carved metal seal being pressed firmly into hot, pliable wax.
And when you pull the metal seal away, the exact shape it left remains perfectly embedded in the wax.
The text argues that the people we truly, profoundly love press their seal into the wax of our souls.
Their unique shape essentially becomes part of our shape. So when they die or when they permanently leave our lives, the physical seal is gone, the metal is removed. But the impression, the negative space they carved out, remains permanently in the wax.
It's permanently there.
The text posits that they continue to move when we move. They literally see the world through our eyes, even though they no longer have eyes of their own. They speak through our chosen words, even though they have no physical voice left.
When I read that wax seal analogy, it completely stopped me in my tracks. It changes grief from a painful process of letting go into a profound process of carrying forward. It suggests that the dead aren't simply gone, banished to some distant celestial waiting room, or lost to the void.
No, they are actively enfolded into the present moment.
The membrane separating the living from the dead is practically non-existent, because you carry their shape inside your own. Their absence becomes a structural part of your presence.
It is a stunning, deeply humanistic consolation. And it ties intimately to how the manuscript views the act of writing itself. Because writing, much like Greer, is a way of navigating the complex boundaries between absence and presence, between life and death.
The fifth meditation dives deep into the mechanics of creation, specifically what actually happens when we attempt to capture a thought in writing. The text views the act of taking a fluid, living, dynamic thought out of your mind and forcing it onto a static piece of paper as a literal sacrifice.
It is the butterfly analogy.
Right. The author compares it to catching a beautiful, wildly fluttering butterfly in a net, killing it and pinning it to a board in a collector's display case. The thought is technically preserved, yes. You can look at the colors on the wings. But the unpredictable life, the chaotic flutter, is gone forever. The thought, once written, is dead.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, though, that violent sacrifice is only half of the circuit. The text argues that while the writer performs the necessary sacrifice of pinning the butterfly, the reader performs a resurrection.
This completely changed how I view the act of reading a book.
When a reader picks up a text, whether it's Petrarch sitting in his study reading the ancient Roman poet Virgil or someone today reading this 2023 manuscript, the black marks on the page cease to be static ink. The text becomes a transparent window.
It comes alive.
Through the engaged attention of the reader, that pinned butterfly suddenly pulls itself off the board and takes flight again inside a new mind. The dead, sacrificed words are quickened back to vibrant life.
It transforms writing from mere communication into actual communion. It is a literal sharing of consciousness across vast expanses of time, space, and even across the barrier of death. It is the entire reason Petrarch spent his life writing letters addressed to dead Roman philosophers. In the realm of the spirit, the passage of Chronos doesn't separate us.
The mind of the writer and the mind of the reader meet in the medium of the text to create a completely new third thing.
Grasping that concept of communion brings a deep, settling sense of peace to the author of these pages as he faces his own impending physical death. Throughout his entire life, Petrarch was utterly terrified of dying. Not just the physical agony of the plague that surrounded him, but the metaphysical terror of the cessation of his consciousness.
The fear of stepping into a black nothingness.
So what does this all mean for him at the very end of his life? How does he finally face the threshold of mortality? He turns to another insect analogy, appropriately enough, the caterpillar.
This is a beautiful image.
He observes that a caterpillar, locked in its current biological reality, cannot possibly imagine what a butterfly is. If a caterpillar possessed a mind, it would look at the hardening chrysalis and logically assume it was a tomb. It would look like the absolute end of consciousness.
But the chrysalis isn't a tomb. It is a matrix for radical transformation. The text argues that human death might function in exactly the same way. It isn't the preservation of the self exactly as it currently exists, the ego, the memories, the personality, but it is also not the total obliterating extinction of the self.
But there's something entirely different.
It is a metamorphosis into a mode of being that we simply lack the mental hardware to conceive of while we are in the caterpillar stage. He approaches the end not with dogmatic religious certainty, but with a profound, trusting hope of eventual reunion.
Which brings us to the fragmenta. These are presented as damaged, water-stained pages tucked at the very end of the manuscript, where he leaves behind some final distilled wisdom. Specifically, he leaves 3 rules for life directed at the youth, though he wryly notes with a bit of dark humor that the young are entirely too obsessed with their own chronos to actually listen to an old man.
Those 3 rules serve as the most direct, actionable takeaways in the entire philosophical exploration. Rule number 1, do not postpone living. He warns that the decades you confidently think you have stretching out before you will violently collapse into years, then months, then days.
The idealized future you are saving yourself for will rapidly become the past you bitterly regret.
As he starkly puts it, the deferred life is the unlived life.
It is so easy to fall into that trap. We are perpetually waiting for the right time to start the project or take the trip or have the hard conversation, and the right time never magically arrives.
It never does.
Rule number 2 is incredibly relevant today. Do not mistake activity for meaning. The text begs the reader to resist the endless, trivial distractions the world so eagerly offers. You can fill every single hour of your day with tasks, reach inbox zero, optimize your routine, and still reach the end of your life completely empty.
You have to actively carve out time for silence. You have to face yourself without the protective armor of your daily accomplishments.
And then there's rule number 3.
Do not fear love. The manuscript is brutally, refreshingly honest here. It does not romanticize love. It acknowledges that allowing yourself to truly love will wound you. It will expose your deepest vulnerabilities, your insecurities, and your insufficiencies.
It is worth it.
It is the great indispensable teacher. It forcefully breaks the heart open, destroying the rigid prison walls of the ego we build around ourselves so that something vastly larger can finally enter.
Those 3 rules really force a moment of internal reckoning. I think we all need to ask ourselves which of those 3 pieces of advice we most need to hear today. Stop indefinitely postponing your actual life. Stop using relentless busyness as a shield to hide from your own mind. And stop hiding from genuine connection just because you are terrified of the inevitable grief it will bring.
It's powerful stuff.
It is wild to think that a text embodying a mind from the 1300s can so accurately pinpoint the exact ways we are routinely sabotaging our own happiness right now.
This raises an important question about the enduring, cyclical nature of human struggles. Over the course of this deep dive, we've navigated some incredibly dense philosophical terrain. We've seen how mentally liberating it can be to stop trying to force a choice between opposing forces and instead learn to actively inhabit the threshold.
We've examined the garden sundial, learning to recognize that our dark shadows and personal melancholies are frequently just the necessary proof of the intense light we've been lucky enough to experience.
We've explored how the concept of the wax seal completely reframes the isolating experience of grief, realizing that we walk around every single day carrying the intricate impressions of everyone we've ever deeply loved.
And we've looked closely at the caterpillar, entering the chrysalis, finding a framework to embrace the terrifying, unavoidable transformations of life, and ultimately the mystery of death, without being paralyzed by fear.
The overarching journey of the Liber Umbræ Lucis is ultimately a journey from the agonizing fragmentation of youth, the desperate desire for fame, the burning need for love, the impossible attempt to be both worldly and perfectly spiritual, to a deeply integrated, peaceful acceptance in old age. It stands as a powerful testament to the ability of words to bridge the seemingly insurmountable gap between isolated souls.
As we wrap up this exploration, I want to leave you with one final lingering image from the very end of the manuscript. It is a vivid dream Petrarch records having about a library. But it is not a physical building constructed with wooden shelves and stone walls.
It's much grander than that.
In the dream, he suddenly realizes that the library is the invisible fabric of consciousness itself. It holds every single thought ever had and every word ever spoken by anyone. And as he wanders the aisles, he finds the books he actually wrote, but he also finds the heavy volumes of the books he could have written but didn't.
All the unfulfilled potential.
All the abandoned ideas, preserved forever in the very fabric of being. So, I invite you to ponder this as you transition back into your day. If every fleeting thought, every unwritten word, and every quiet intention is permanently preserved in the infinite library of human consciousness, what specific volumes are you choosing to add to the shelves right now?